السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد نادانا نوح فلنعم المجيبون ونجيناه وأهله من الكرب العظيم وجعلنا ذريته هم الباقين وتركنا عليه في الآخرين سلام على نوح في العالمين إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين ثم أغرقنا الآخرين. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وأزواجه وذرياته. وَلَقَدْ نَادَانَا نُوحٌ. Indeed, Nuh alayhis salam called to us. فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ. How excellently do we respond. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ. We rescued him and his family مِنَ الْكَرْبِ الْعَظِيمِ, from a great calamity. وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ. We made his progeny the only survivors. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. And in his favor we left among those to come after him سَلَامٌ عَلَى نُوحٍ فِي الْعَالَمِينَ. Peace be to Nuh alayhi salam in the universe. إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Thus do we reward those who do good. إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He, Nuh alayhi salam, was certainly from our slaves who are mu'mineen. ثُمَّ أَغْرَقْنَا الْآخَرِينَ. Thereafter we drowned the rest. We continue with the commentary of Surah As-Saffat, and we have reached verse number 75, which is the beginning of the third ruku. From the third ruku, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now begins to mention some of the stories of the previous Anbiya alayhimus salatu wassalam. Beginning with Sayyiduna Nuh alayhi salam. Allah Ta'ala speaks about Nuh alayhi salam. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Sayyiduna Ibrahim alayhi salam. And in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, two of his sons are also mentioned, Ismail alayhi salam and Ishaq alayhi salam. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a mention of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. And together with Musa alayhi salam, his brother Hazrat Harun alayhi salam. After this, Allah Ta'ala mentions regarding Sayyiduna Ilyas alayhi salam. After Ilyas alayhi salam, Allah Ta'ala speaks about Sayyiduna Lut alayhi salam. And after Lut alayhi salam, finally Allah Ta'ala speaks about Sayyiduna Yunus alayhi salam. And one of the reasons why these incidents of the prophets are being mentioned here, the connection between the upcoming verses and the previous verses, as it has been explained before as well, that this is also one science which the ulama have delved into, that what is the correlation and the connection between verses of the Qur'an. So if we look here, in the previous verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned that وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا فِيهِمْ مُنذِرِينَ, we certainly sent warners among them. So there, in a very brief manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this reality, that in the previous nations we sent warners, meaning the Anbiya alayhimus salatu was salam, the prophets. And together with mentioning this reality, Allah Ta'ala then indicated towards this point that those who obeyed the prophets, they were successful, and those who disobeyed the prophets, they were destroyed. So after mentioning this briefly, now Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala goes into some more detail and mentions these various prophets, that look, these are the warners that we sent. And when they warned their nations, this is what happened with those who accepted their da'wah and their propagation. And this is what happened to those who rejected their call. So this is the connection between the previous verses and these verses. Now the first prophet that has been mentioned here is Sayyiduna Nuh alayhi salam. One point to understand is that in the glorious Qur'an, there are only two prophets. Or you can say there are only two surahs. There are only two surahs in the Qur'an where the entire surah is regarding the story of a particular prophet. One is Surah Yusuf. So in Surah Yusuf, right from the beginning until the end, the entire surah is regarding the life story of Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhi salam. The entire surah. And in order, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And the second surah is Surah Nuh. Surah Nuh, the entire surah is regarding the story of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. But there is a difference between the two. The difference is that in Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned Yusuf alayhi salam's entire life story. And thereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not mention anything regarding Yusuf alayhi salam's story in any other part of the Qur'an. Yes, Yusuf alayhi salatu was salam, his name has been mentioned in another verse. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ يُوسُفُ مِنْ قَبْلُ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. But it's a very small mention of Yusuf alayhi salam. There is nothing regarding his incident or his story. A person doesn't need to refer to that verse in order to understand Yusuf alayhi salatu was salam's life story. If he just has Surah Yusuf in front of him, then this is sufficient. He will not have to refer to that verse. But as far as Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam is concerned, then although Surah Nuh is entirely regarding Nuh alayhi salatu was salam's life story, But if a person wants to understand the entire life story of Nuh alayhi salam, he cannot suffice by only studying Surah Nuh. He will also have to refer to the other verses which are present in other parts of the Qur'an. Everything is not mentioned in Surah Nuh. And there are two surahs. One is Surah Nuh and the other is Surah Hud. In these two surahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the main parts of Nuh alayhi salatu was salam's life story. So in order to understand Nuh alayhi salam's life story, a person will have to refer to Surah Hud also and Surah Nuh also. And in other parts of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then indicates and hints towards this incident. Another point to keep in mind is that one reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the incidents of the various prophets in the Quran is in order to console and strengthen the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is calling his people towards believing in the oneness of Allah Ta'ala with great concern. He is making great sacrifices. Night, day, he is trying to call people towards Iman. But instead of them believing in him, instead of them accepting his message, he is having to face challenge upon challenge. They are attacking him. They are calling him names. They are calling him a liar. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَكُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. That we mention these incidents of all these various prophets in the Quran to strengthen your heart. That you are not the only one who is facing these challenges. All of these previous prophets, when they called their people towards the true religion, then they also had to face these challenges. And after mentioning this reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes into the details by mentioning these incidents. That look, when Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam called his people towards the oneness of Allah and that he is the Prophet of Allah, then this was the result. This is how he was treated. So one reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the incidents of the prophets of the past is to strengthen the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and console him. And there is a principle in the Arabic language that al-bala'u idha ammat khaffat. When a calamity is shared amongst quite a few people, then that calamity becomes light. You have one student who has done something wrong, and he is told that today at 5 p.m. the principal wants you in his office. So he will feel very fearful, very worried, very concerned. But thereafter he is informed that there are 3 other boys also who have made the same mistake as you, and they have also been summoned to the principal's office. Now it becomes more easier. It's going to be the same punishment. But when you know that there's others with me, it becomes easier. This is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to fast in the month of Ramadan, what does Allah ta'ala say? Kutiba alaykumus siyam. Fasting has been made compulsory upon you. Kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. Just as it was made compulsory upon all the nations before you. The commentators of the Qur'an say Allah Ta'ala here keeps in mind the psychology of the human being. That it just becomes more easier that if they could all fast and they were also human beings, this means even we can fast. Otherwise it would have been very difficult to understand that how can I refrain from food and drink from morning to evening. So Allah Ta'ala is saying everyone else has done it before you also. It's nothing new. So Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from here is mentioning or just indicating towards his life that وَلَقَدْ نَادَانَا نُوحٌ فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ. Indeed, Nuh alayhi salatu was salam called to us, meaning he made dua. فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ. How excellently do we respond? How excellently do we accept the du'as and the supplications. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam, he called his people towards the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 950 years. In Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this very clearly. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا. That Nuh alayhi salam was sent to his people and he remained in his people for 950 years. The Mufassirin mention that these 950 years are the years where he propagated to his people. Otherwise, before this, there are various opinions. One opinion is he was granted prophethood at the age of 40. So even before the 950 years, he lived for 40 years. Thereafter, he propagated for 950 years. And after the 950 years, after his nation was punished, he still remained in the world. And again, there are various opinions as to how many more years he lived. But in here there is a great lesson for those who call others towards the deen, towards believing in Allah Ta'ala or towards obeying Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And look at how Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam remained steadfast, that he continued to call towards the oneness of Allah for 950 years. He did not give up. For 950 years. And during these 950 years, he himself says that Rabbi inni da'awtu qawmi laylan wa nahara. Oh my Rabb, I was calling them at night also and in the day also. I left no stone unturned. فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا. But the more I called them towards you, the more they fled. I was telling them to accept the message, but the more I would tell them, the more they would run away. وَإِنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتُهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ. Whenever I call them, جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. They would place their fingers inside their ears. They did not want to listen. وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ. And they would hide inside their clothes. وَأَصَرُّوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. And their pride and their arrogance did not let them accept this message. So 950 years he calls. And what is the result? After 950 years, between 80 to 82, just something over 80, 81, 82, 83. This is how many people accepted his message. So just imagine the steadfastness of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam. That when you are sent in the world with a mission, and a great mission, Then after 100 years, after 200 years, after 300 years, when you see there's only 15 people, 20 people, 30 people, it would be very easy for a person to give up. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us that no, hidayah and guidance, this is not in your hands and this is not in your control. So you need to continue with this effort until you breathe your last. Whether 100 people accept your message or one person accepts your message or no one accepts your message. Your duty is to call people towards the deen, and it is Allah Ta'ala's duty to grant them hidayah and guidance. So he calls them for 950 years. And approximately 80 people accept. Now, over here there is one more point to understand, and this is that Hazrat Nuh alayhis salatu was salam, he is the first Rasul. What does this mean? Those prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in English we use the word prophet. This is very important to understand. In English we use the word prophet, but in Arabic there are two words. One is Rasul and one is Nabi. And they are both different. There is a difference between Rasul and Nabi. A Rasul is that individual who is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a new Sharia, a new set of laws, new commands. And he is also sent to a new nation. This is a Rasul. And a Nabi is he who continues with the same Sharia as the previous prophet. And he also works in the same nation as the previous prophet. For this reason, a Rasul is more virtuous than a Nabi. And every Rasul is a Nabi. But every Nabi is not a Rasul. It's just like every alim is not a mufti, but every mufti is an alim. Every teacher is a student. Because until you are not a student, you cannot become a teacher. But every student doesn't become a teacher. So, a Rasul is more greater than the Nabi. Now, before Nuh alayhi salatu was salam, we had Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, who is the very first human being, and we say the very first prophet. But Adam alayhi salam was not a Rasul, he was just a Nabi. Idris alayhi salam, Sheeth alayhi salam, they were all Nabi, they were not Rasul. The first Rasul was Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. And the reason for this is that before Nuh alayhi salam, if we start from Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, then from Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu was salam to when Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam came into this world, the Mufassirin mentioned there was a period of approximately 1,000 years. And these are the very first 1,000 years for humanity. Before this, there were no humans. So humanity was still in its childhood during these first 1,000 years. Now, when you have a young child in the house, you cannot enforce very difficult commands upon a child. Nobody says to a child to do something which is very difficult. The most we say to the child is Allah is one. Allah gives you sweets. Allah gives us everything. Simple, basic things. Aqaid, beliefs. You embed within the child the aqaid and the beliefs. Simple aqaid and beliefs. And together with this, big etiquettes. When you give something to someone, give it with your right hand. If you eat with your right hand. So simple things. From the time of Hazrat Adam alayhis salam until the time of Hazrat Nuh alayhis salam, humanity was still in its childhood. So there was no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to send down a sharia and commands upon them. So there was no real sharia during these first 1,000 years. They were just simple aqaid and beliefs. Believe in Allah, believe in the angels, believe in the prophets, believe in life after death. Believe that everything that happens, good and bad, is from Allah Ta'ala. And whatever wahi and revelation would come down, what would the wahi be regarding? The wahi would be regarding things such as, how do you sew clothes? How do you make utensils and use utensils? How do you do farming? Because someone had to teach this to the human. They were the very first humans in the world. They did not know how to live in this world. So wahi and revelation was regarding how to live in this world. Now, when Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam comes into this world, this is when humanity has reached that age when a person is around 14, 15, a youth. Now he has understanding. Now if he was to make a mistake, the parent will reprimand him. The parent will punish him. The parent will even say that you are no longer a child now. So when Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam came into this world, humanity had reached that age that if they now make a mistake, they will be worthy of reprimanding and punishment. And after Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam, if you continue, then we reach that phase when Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam came into this world. So when Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam came into this world, humanity had now reached that age when a person is 40 years of age. And when a person reaches 40 years of age, this is when he is granted hikmah and wisdom. A person is granted hikmah and wisdom at the age of 40. And those who have lived their lives in accordance to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then not only do they become wise from a worldly point of view, but you will see words of wisdom flowing from their tongue also, regarding deen, regarding akhirah, regarding Allah ta'ala. This happens from the age of 40 onwards. This is why we see that if a person was to study history, he will find that before Ibrahim alayhi salam, there are no thinkers or philosophers. All the great thinkers and philosophers who we know, they all came into this world after Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam's time. Because this is when humanity had reached that age of 40. And finally, when a person reaches the age of approximately 55, this is when Allah Ta'ala grants him all the strength and powers. They have all now reached their peak. And the difference between this 55-year-old and the 40-year-old is that if there is a very sensitive issue, then the 40-year-old, it's very possible when he takes a step, he will let his emotions get the better of him. And the 55-year-old, he has tolerance. He will sit and he will think thoroughly before making the decision. He will not let his emotions get the better of him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needed to send the best prophet and the best book, that book which had the greatest of ulum and knowledge. So for this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waited. He didn't send it when the humanity was still in its childhood, or when humanity was still in its youth, when humanity was still at the age of 40. No, Allah ta'ala waited. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waited, and when humanity had reached that age, then now they are capable of taking this great ulum and this great knowledge which is present. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send the greatest teacher, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And send this highest level of syllabus also, the glorious Qur'an. Because these individuals will be able to take it in. Now here there is one more point to understand. That as far as the previous Anbiya alayhimus salatu wassalam were concerned, their Sharia became outdated. One prophet came. When his Sharia became outdated, then Allah Ta'ala sent a new Rasul to a new people with a new Sharia. He leaves the world, a new Rasul comes with a new Sharia. Now every time a new Rasul comes with a new Sharia, a new set of commands, the previous Sharia becomes outdated. Now even in this day and age, there is this question that we have been practicing upon the religion of Islam, which was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam for more than 1400 years. So there is this claim that Islam is also outdated now. There is a need to renew this religion, to modernize Islam. So after listening to this explanation, now you should understand the answer very easily. When you have a young child who is 3 months, when this child becomes 6 months, this child needs new clothes because the child is growing. Likewise, this child is 5 years old, he needs new clothes. The 5-year-old, when he's 15-year-olds, they continue to grow. But when you study a human being, you will find that at the age of 55, this is the approximate age when a person now has no inclination towards new styles. Whatever his style is, this remains his style till death now. Even a person who has a lot of interest in wearing different clothing, different cars, different houses, after this age, he sticks to one style. So humanity, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was sent, had reached that age of 55. Now there was no need for any change. Now until the day of Qiyamah, Allah Ta'ala says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum. Today I have completed your religion. So this Islam will now fit you until the day of Qiyamah. Your size is not going to change anymore. Your style is not going to change anymore. This style will never become outdated now. So this was a very important explanation which was needed so that we can understand the different phases in which the different prophets were sent, and also why there is no need to now modernize Islam. So anyway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is mentioning regarding Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam, that وَلَقَدْ نَعْدَانَا نُوحٌ فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ, that Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam, he called towards us, and how excellently do we respond. The Mufassirin mentioned that this could have one of two meanings as far as the dua which Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam made. One is in Surah Al-Qamar, where Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam made this dua that Rabbi anni maghlubun fantasir. Oh my Rabb, I have now become overpowered, so you assist me. And the second dua is that Nuh alayhi salam made was Rabbi la tadhar ala al-ardi min al-kafirina dayyara. That, oh my Rabb, do not leave on the earth any of the disbelievers, the homes of any of the disbelievers. Destroy all of them. And the reason why Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam had to make this dua against his people is because after doing everything which he could, he propagated to them for 950 years, and during this time also there were many occasions when they would stone him. Allama ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi mentions that they would stone him in such a way that he would fall unconscious and he would drown in all of these stones which were thrown towards him. And after, when he would regain his consciousness, then he would come out from these stones. And as soon as he would come out, he would once again start propagating the deen. So even in here, there is a lesson for us. That when we call people towards the deen, then no matter what challenges we have to face, we have to continue. But finally, it got to this stage where they decided that now we are going to kill him. So when this became the plan, that now they are going to kill Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam, and his life was in danger, he had no other choice but to make dua against his people. So it's regarding this, Allah Ta'ala is saying that He made dua to us, and when He made dua, we accepted the dua. And what happened? The details of this are found in Surah Hud, but just to very briefly mention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first of all told Nuh alayhi salatu was salam to build a ship, to make a ship. وَيَصْنَعُ الْفُلْكِ وَصْنَعِ الْفُلْكِ, to make a ship. And the Mufassirin mentioned that this was the very first ship which was made in history. Before this, a ship had never been made before. And Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salatu was salam was sent by Allah Ta'ala, and Jibreel alayhi salam taught Nuh alayhi salatu was salam. It was under his instructions that Nuh alayhi salam made this ship. And when this ship was being made, وَكُلَّمَا مَرَّ عَلَيْهِ مَلَأٌ مِّنْ قَوْمِهِ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُ, the people, they would make fun out of him. The people, they would begin to say, that until now he was a prophet and now he's become a carpenter. He's making a ship now. He's changed his profession from, in our terms, from Imam Sahib, he's become a carpenter. From the Nabi, he's become a carpenter. But again, he did not think to himself that they're making fun out of me. No, he continued with his duty. And the other thing they would say is that there is no water around here. There are no rivers, there are no oceans. Well, how foolish is he that he's making a ship? What are we going to do with a ship? Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam would say that in taskharu minna fa inna naskharu minkum kama taskharun. You are making fun out of me today. A day will come when we will be making fun out of you. That day is also going to come. Finally, the day came. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Nuh alayhi salam that those who have accepted your message, those approximately 80 people, they should all board onto the ship. And together with this, certain animals, Nuh alayhi salam was instructed, they were also placed on this ship. And thereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the rain and the flood. And a great flood. Allama ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi mentions that this was the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was no ordinary flood. One woman who was also from the disbelievers, when she saw that the water is coming towards her, she began to climb the mountain. And As she began to climb up the mountain, she saw that the water is also following her up the mountain. And she had a small baby in her hands. So when she saw that the water has come all the way to her stomach, she lifted the baby up to her chest. When the water reached her chest, she lifted the baby up towards her head. And when the water reached her head, she lifted the baby above her head. But the water continued to come. First she drowned and thereafter the baby drowned. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions that if on that day Allah Ta'ala was to have mercy on anyone, it would have been this mother and her child. But this was the wrath and anger of Allah Ta'ala on that day. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam's wife and Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam's son, because they also had not accepted his message, they were also drowned. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam said to his son, Ya bunayya, irkab ma'ana wa la takum ma'al kafirin. That, oh my son, come board onto the ship with us and do not be with the kafirin. But what did the boy say? Sa'awi ila jabalin ya'simuni min al-ma'. I will climb the mountain, and this climbing up the mountain will save me from this water. But Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam said, La asim al-yawma min amri Allahi illa man rahim. Today nobody is going to be saved from this matter of Allah Ta'ala. And as this conversation was taking place, وَحَالَ بَيْنَهُمَ الْمَوْجِ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْمُغْرَقِينَ. He was also drowned. So they were all drowned, all those who disbelieved. Who remained? وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ. We rescued him, meaning Nuh alayhi salam. وَأَهْلَهُ. And his family, مِنَ الْكَرْبِ الْعَظِيمِ. From a great calamity. So this al-Karb al-Azim here refers to the flood. We saved Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam, and we saved his family. Family here does not mean those who did not believe in him. As mentioned, his son was drowned, his wife was also drowned. But he also had other sons who had accepted his message, they were saved. And وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ. We made his progeny the only survivors. We made his progeny the only survivors. What does this mean? One opinion of the commentators of the Qur'an is that when this flood took place, only those people, the approximately 82, they remained in this world, they remained alive. But together with this, people in other parts of the world, they also remained alive. And the reason why they remained alive is because Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam, he was only sent to a certain group of people. So for example, we have Leicester, and if Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam is sent here to Leicester, then someone living in London or Manchester or another part of the world, the message has not reached him. So he cannot be expected to accept this message. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment, when it came down, only those people were affected that were in that nation when Nuh alayhi salam was sent, that part of the world. And the remaining people in other parts of the world, they remained alive. They were not affected by the floods. But there is also a second opinion. And the second opinion is that this flood, it affected the entire world. So after this flood, it was only Nuh alayhi salam and the 80 people. They were the only ones in the world. Besides them, there was nobody else in the world. They were the only ones living. And some commentators of the Qur'an have explained this in this way, that if you were to raise this objection that why would Allah Ta'ala send the flood in other parts of the world when the Prophet was not sent there, this would be unjust towards them. Then this objection has no basis, because Nuh alayhi salatu was salam, his time is only approximately 1,000 years after Adam alayhi salam. So the world has only been in existence for approximately 1,000 years as far as humanity is concerned. So it's very possible that the humans were only living in that area when Nuh alayhi salam was sent. And in the other parts of the world, nobody was living. So the flood affected the entire world. But because there was nobody living in other parts of the world, it was only these people that were affected. Those who believed in him, they remained alive, and those who did not believe in him, they were destroyed. So now we have Nuh alayhi salam and the approximate 80 people. And here in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ, that we made his progeny the only survivors. So one meaning of this is that we made his progeny, meaning we made the mu'minin, his spiritual progeny, the only survivors. That the 80 people, they remained alive, and from them, the humanity thereafter continued. But there is also a second opinion, which is the more famous opinion. This is that Allah Ta'ala here is saying, وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ, we made his progeny the only survivors. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma and other commentators of the Quran mention what this means is that after this flood, Nuh alayhi salatu was salam had 3 sons who were on the ship also. From there onwards, whoever came into this world, they are the progeny of one of these 3 sons. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it such that nobody else had children after this, because there were only 80 people anyway. So if there were only approximately 80 people, those other 77, Allah Ta'ala did not bless them with children. Which means you have 3 sons of Nuh alayhi salam. One's name was Ham, one was Sam, and the third was Yafith. Allah Ta'ala only blessed these 3 with children. So now, any person, if he was to trace back his genealogy and look at his family tree, he will see that it goes back to one of these sons of Nuh alayhi salam. And if it goes back to one of Nuh alayhi salam's sons, then this means it goes back to Nuh alayhi salam. And this is why Nuh alayhi salam is known as Adam-e-Thani, the second Adam. Because just as our family tree goes back to Adam alayhi salam, he has to first go through Nuh alayhi salatu was salam and thereafter to Adam alayhi salam. So every person here, his family tree will go back to Nuh alayhi salatu was salam. So he's known as Adam-e-Thani, the second Adam. And Allama Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi has mentioned some more details regarding this, that for example, if you take the first son whose name was Sam, then Sam became the father of the Arabs and the Persians and the surrounding areas. Meaning those people even today, the Arabs, the Persians and the surrounding areas, if they were to trace their genealogy back, they will find that it goes back to this son of Nuh alayhi salam whose name is Sam. And as far as Ham is concerned, then those who live in Africa and surrounding areas, and likewise India, Asia, these areas, then they go back to Ham. So from Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam, those who are Indian or Asian, most possibly they go back to this son of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Ham. And finally, you have Yafith, so the area of Turkey and surrounding areas. The people who live in Turkey and the surrounding areas of Turkey, then they go back to the third son of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Yafith. So Allah Ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ. We made his progeny the only survivors. So, that after this flood, only Nuh alayhi salam's 3 sons had children, and thereafter humanity continues through these 3 streams. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. And in his favor we left among those to come after him, salām ala Nuhin fil alameen. Peace be to Nuh alayhi salam in the universe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here that we left behind this dua, that all the prophets that came after Nuh alayhi salam, they spoke very highly of him, they mentioned him to their people, and now until the day of Qiyamah, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam will remain with honor and dignity. Not only did the Prophet speak highly of him, but Mufti Shafi Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi mentions that the Christians and the Jews, those other religions which have some sort of connection with the divine laws and divine books, then they also hold Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu was salam in high regard. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored him in this way. إِنَّهُ مِنْ إِبَادِنَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And the reason for this is that he was from our slaves who were the mu'mineen, the believers. ثُمَّ أَغْرَقْنَا الْآخَرِينَ. Thereafter we drowned the rest. So in here there is a lesson for us, that a person who accepts Iman, and after accepting Iman he obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one, saves him from the punishments. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saves him from calamities. And together with this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also honors him. Yes, in the beginning there will be challenges. Yes, in the beginning there will be difficulties. But a time will come when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will most definitely grant this person honor. And finally we also learn that even after a person's death, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to grant him honor. And until the day of Qiyamah, people will continue to speak highly of him. Like we see here for Nuh alayhi salam, that even hundreds and thousands of years after his demise, we still are reading in the Qur'an regarding him, and we are also saying salām ala Nuhin fil alameen, but peace be to Nuh alayhi salam in the universe. So these are the few verses regarding Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. After this, Allah Ta'ala speaks about Ibrahim alayhi salam, which we will inshallah discuss in next week's lesson. There is Allama Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi, under the commentary of this ayah, has mentioned regarding Hazrat Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib rahmatullahi alayhi, that Hazrat Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib rahmatullahi alayhi used to say that if a person wants to be saved from being stung by a scorpion, and this does not mean necessarily that only being saved by being stung by a scorpion, but any other calamity, any other illness, then reading these words, salām ala Nuhin fil alameen, they have proved to be very beneficial. So if a person was to read this with this intention, that I will be saved from illnesses or any calamities, then it's been experienced by the likes of Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib that a person reads salām ala Nuhin fil alameen. So everyone is requested to at least read it once right now. Salām ala Nuhin fil alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to appreciate these verses of the Qur'an and to understand the message which is in these verses. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also grant us this unquenching thirst to continue calling people towards His deen, towards practicing upon His deen, until we breathe our last. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the success of this world also, and the success of the hereafter also. May He make us from the people of paradise, and may He save us from being from the people of Jahannam and the hellfire. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen والصلاة والسلام على رسوله سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. اللهم باعد بيننا وبين خطايانا كما باعدت بين المشرق والمغرب. اللهم ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم نور قلوبنا بالقرآن وزين أخلاقنا بالقرآن وأدخلنا الجنة بالقرآن ونجنا من النار بالقرآن. اللهم أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين ولا تنزع منا صالح ما أعطيتنا. اللهم حول سفرنا هذا واطل عنا بعدا. اللهم اجعل القرآن العظيم ربيع قلوبنا وجلاء أحزاننا وذهاب همومنا وهمومنا وقائدنا وسائقنا إلى جنات النعيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم بارك لنا بالقرآن العظيم وانفعنا بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. اللهم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا. اللهم رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم ونعوذ بك من الشر كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذ منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.